Well, welcome to today's National Soil Survey Center webinar. My name is Sean McVeigh, National Training Coordinator for the Soil and Plant Science Division, and host for today's webinar, the Von Post Method, Application, and Video. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our YouTube channel within a few business days. All participants join the webinar in listen-only mode. You receive the webinar audio through your device's speakers. There is no telephone dial-in. If you're having audio difficulties, please check the various ways your computer speakers may be muted or have their volume set low, including the speaker adjustments available in the Adobe Connect interface. Be sure to turn up the volume if you need. You can maximize your webinar experience in Adobe Connect by shutting down Cisco AnyConnect and any other programs that might compete for bandwidth. This includes email and Microsoft Outlook and instant messaging in Skype. Taking a look at our webinar room layout, Adobe Connect has content pods that include the featured presentation, handouts, web links, and the Q&A pod. Use the 4-arrow icon in the featured presentation pod to enter and exit to full screen mode as you choose. We're here to answer your questions. To submit a comment or question for me or our presenters, use the Q&A pod and type in your question. I'll handle technical difficulties the best we can while hosting the webinar and interact with our presenters to answer your questions during the verbal Q&A period. I want to thank Matt Dorman, soil scientist and GIS specialist in Tallinn, Connecticut, Steve Monteith, PhD soil scientist at the Kellogg Soil Survey Lab, and Mike Rokas, soil scientist in Duluth, Minnesota, for being here to support our webinar. Mike, I'm going to turn the webinar over to you so you can introduce the topic and get us started.
All right, thank you very much, Sean. I will introduce to you the Von Post scale and its origins. The use of the scale and technique which determine the degree of decomposition of organic soil layers. It is used internationally as well as by NRCS soil scientists. Next, I will run through the factors that we assess and the assessment levels we come to and how we make those assessments. I found an accurate summary of the history of studying organic soils and would like to share it with you. It's from the book titled Peatland Biogeochemistry and Watershed Hydrology. Compared with research on mineral soils, the study of the physical properties of organic soils in the United States is relatively new. Always Anderson and Associates considered the value and reclamation of peats in Minnesota and nationally. Davis and Lucas summarized organic soil formation, utilization, and management in Michigan. However, most of the literature on the detailed physical properties of peat was published from 1956 to 2003. This is true in Europe as well, except for a study by Von Post in 1922, who developed a field method for determining the degree of humification or decomposition that is used widely outside of the United States. The scale was devised by Lennart von Post during his work on the 1926 Soil Survey of Sweden for measurement of degree of decomposition of dead plant materials. First, we started with a problem. The problem was how to determine the degree of decomposition of organic soil layers consistently and correctly among a soil survey crew. A little background: at the time, we were using the USDA rub fibers visual estimation method. We did not have clear guidelines as to how many times to rub the sample or how hard to rub the samples. In many cases, we would start with what we thought was a HEMIC sample and rub it down to a SAPRIC sample, being inconsistent and often incorrect. Thus, we needed a different method. A little research found that there were many options to choose from. These methods are from an article in the Soil Science Society of America Journal. Several methods employ the use of a centrifuge. Other methods require weighing a dried sample, which would require drying time and a scale. Neither of these methods were field-friendly means of determining the degree of decomposition of an organic layer. The USDA pyrophosphate color test was rated as most inaccurate of all 11 methods. the von Post scale and method quickly jumped out as the most field-friendly and accurate test we could find. I'd like to go look at the 4 factors to assess using the von Post scale method. First observation is the quantity of water expressed, which typically ranges from no water expressed from the sample to about 25 milliliters. Second, we look at the nature of the water expressed. How turbid is it? How dark is it? An estimate of how much amorphous material is suspended in the water that is expressed. Third, we look at the portion of the sample extruded. How much of the sample is extruded between the fingers and the palm as a percent of the whole sample? And finally, we look at the nature of the residues. What percent of the remaining sample not extruded between the fingers and palm is fibrous versus amorphous? How to complete a field examination? Well, place enough soil to fill the hand when the fingers are gently curved against the palm. Gently bounce this egg-shaped soil unit until it fits your hand. Add or remove organic material to fill the gently curved pocket in your hand. Squeeze the sample as hard as you can, but I like to start out easy and increase with pressure as the water and sample is expressed. With the other hand cupped below, catch the amorphous material and water that is squeezed out between the fingers. In this example, we are going to say that the sample expressed a small amount of water and that it was strongly turbid. Water content can range from 25 milliliters to none. Drain off liquid portion and consolidate the amorphous material remaining in that hand. Open both hands and make an estimate of the percent extruded material. In our office simulation here, let's assume that about 10% of the sample was extruded between the fingers and palm of the squeezing hand. Finally, make an estimate of the volume of fibers of the non-extruded sample. For the purposes moving forward, we will assume 45% fibers. So, after performing those tests, here's an example of determining the von Post scale of humification. We had a small amount of water from the sample that was strongly turbid. In column 3, that coincides with H5. With 10% of the sample extruded from the hand in column 4, that coincides with H5, 2 to 25%. And with the remaining sample being about 45% fibers, thus a bulk of the remains were difficult to identify. Again, correlates to the definition in column 5 of the scale on the H5 line. All the assessments lead us to a line of H5 on the von Post scale of humification. It is by assessing all 4 factors and placing them on the scale that we determine the degree of decomposition of a soil sample. This is also shown in greater detail on the NRCS YouTube video, von Post scale of humification. It is common for the assessment to give you values in 2 different rows instead of 1, in which case I go with the row that has the most evidence, hoping I have 2 values in one row and only 1 in another row. Remember, this is a learned field method. It takes time and practice to get all team members applying the method consistently and correctly. But it is the method that I have been able to be consistent in applying with my team members. Final thought is that we get the correct in lieu of texture for a given sample. Always make sure to be looking at the bigger picture here. The von Post scale of humification. Here is the tool I use to arrive at a determination of the degree of decomposition. Using the 4 factors previously described, I've split the scale into 3 pieces to aid in viewing the text for presentation purposes. So look at the next 3 slides as being 1 scale. Quantity of water expressed. Let's look at the H1 to H3 portion of the scale. Quantity of water expressed. Under equal field conditions, there's much more water expressed from fibric samples than hemic or sapric. The comparison is an equal weight-based comparison. Read down column 3 for descriptions of nature of water expressed. For fibric samples, we see clear to slightly turbid water. There is no or very little amorphous material in the water. Portion of peat extruded between the fingers. Please see column 4. In fibric samples, there is no amorphous material extruded between the fingers. Nature of peat residues. Well, all these determinations have a bit of art form embedded within them. This one leads the group. It is a visual estimate as to what part of the sample is fibrous and what part is non-fibrous. Greater than 3/4 of the sample is fibrous in fibric samples. Next, we'll review the H4 through H6 portion of the von Post scale, which correlates to Hemic in lieu of texture. Quantity of water expressed, column 3, Hemic samples express a moderate amount of water. Read down column 3 for descriptions of nature of water expressed. Those are turbid to strongly turbid to muddy. Portions of peat extruded between the fingers. Please see column 4. In Hemic samples, less than half of the material is extruded between the fingers. Nature of peat residues. In Hemic samples, 1/6 to 3/4 fibers are visible. I use these numbers as provided by Soil Taxonomy and Soil Survey Manual. Let's look at the humification scale, H7 through H10. Quantity of water expressed, column 3. Sapric samples exhibit very little to no water. Read down column 3 for descriptions of nature of water expressed. In sapric samples, the water expressed is strongly muddy to no free water expressed. Portion of peat extruded between the fingers, please see column 4. In sapric samples, there is more than half of the sample that is extruded between the fingers. And nature of peat residues. In sapric samples, there is less than 1/6 of the sample that is made up of identifiable fibers. That completes my description of the technique to use the von Post method to determine the degree of decomposition of an organic sample. Thank you, and I would like to turn it back to Sean at this time.
All right, Matt, you want to take over?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. All right. Hello, I'm Matt Gorman, soil science GIS specialist from Tolland, Connecticut, and I'm going to speak with you today about some solutions to the problem, some problems that your typical field soil scientist runs into. Now, so one thing, gathering precise and consistent field sample data. That's always one of the first things a field soil scientist wants to attempt out in the field. And these areas, as you know, is this picture is describing one in the marshes. It includes your ponded, your flooded, inundated areas. Nothing is worse than going back at the end of the day or at the end of the detail saying, yeah, couldn't grab that sample due to either conditions, environmental conditions, weather, or the soil just having so much vacuum and being submerged that you didn't bring up a large enough size to send to the KSSL lab. All right, here's a photo of a fellow co-worker of mine. So when you're out in the field, your typical go-to tools are your Dutch auger, bucket auger, you get your core, and McCulley auger. And you can get quite a bit of data and grab a decent amount of sample using that. However, though, depending on the type of fluidity of the material you sample, and if you use your standard core, that's just going to ooze right out of there, and it's going to fail as far as getting a good representative sample. So again, what do you do, when you're in the field and trying to grab this precise and consistent data? So one of things that I've found that helped out is collaboration. Talk to people, talk to other professional soil scientists. We spoke with professors from URI, University of Maine, and University of New England. This is a photo here taken by Dr. Morgan and one of her students, Tessa, and we collaborated, gaining access to areas. This is at UNE, and we were able to set up a sampling project and started to compare what methods and what tools work best in the different type of horizons and or horizons with different fluidity ranges. And the next slide, yeah. So again, collaboration gives you solutions. So one of my other first places that I went to, I called my friends over at the KSSL laboratory and asked them, what is it that they did? I reached out to the Coastal Zone team. Here you can see Jim Tureen. He's got a ladder there set up. That's a backpack vibrocore, and he's got a really big syringe. And here I also have showing Mike Wilson's sampler, and which works great. And here I just have another, so you can see Macaulay. And talking with these people and finding out what tool works best for them. And so moving on, the second part of the solution is collaborate and innovate. So ultimately, find out what works best for you. I loved Mike Wilson's sampler so much that I decided to design my own, and it could be used in the field. I also really liked Phil King's King sampler, and these photos over here on the right shows me using it in an actually inundated freshwater situation. And reaching out to other people, other people use slide hammers, soil piston core. So it was very beneficial for our team to collaborate, pull in all these ideas, sharing of research papers, and being able to find some tools that work in tricky situations. And bringing this all together, it was realized not only do we need to investigate the sampling tool and methods, but we need a more detailed and objective way to observe the range of these properties. And we needed to improve our historical field fiber method, our standard peat, mucky peat, muck, because it didn't cover using the tools, using one tool for, let's say, muck, not just one tool worked for sampling everything. So, and it's especially important with these problem areas and these difficult properties to extract a large enough volume of sample to send into the lab. So what I really want to focus in on is that even if you aren't able to pull out a large amount of soil, you can pull out a sample size as small as an egg size that fits in your palm, and you can use that, use the von Post method, and collect sufficient data rather than not being able to collect any data and being able to tie it to either that site or that horizon. So it really increases providing data, and that's what we're trying to do, is provide more, accurate and concise data. And I just want to say thank you to all the Coastal Zone team members and partners. Here are a handful who helped us in the state of Maine, universities, the state itself, and other partnerships and collaboratives that work to help us gain access and do some of this testing. And that's it. Happy sampling. And thanks again. And I'll turn it back over to you, Sean.
All right. Thank you, Matt. Steve, you're up.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Okay. Having looked at the field application and the procedure of von Post, what is it good for? What can we use it for? So that's some of the things that I'm going to go over. For mineral soils, there's a well-developed system of describing the soils with a lot of descriptors and categories. Here's some of the things that mineral soils have been studied for a long time, and there's a well-developed system for describing them. And there are terms that can be used in quantitative applications and determination. So in addition to these, there are detailed things like pores and concretions, nodules. So that's well developed for mineral soils. For organic soils, the system of describing them is not as well developed. USDA, for example, is one of the major things that's used in interpretations for mineral soils. A lot of it, your interpretations, physical, chemical even, use PSDA. For organic soils, that's not an option. Technically, you could determine PSDA, but at a relatively low organic carbon content, the characteristics of the mineral particles are overshadowed. So a different system of describing and using organic soil materials is needed. Fiber content has kind of emerged as the dominant or one of the primary descriptors that's used for organic soil materials. And in some cases, it kind of serves as a proxy for texture. In applications where you would use texture, you would use fiber content. Fiber content is, as Mike and Matt kind of alluded to, it's the primary classification categories use fiber content. And on the good side, it's fairly easy. It's something that can be determined in the field fairly quickly and easily. On the downside is that it is a visual estimation, and that unlike PSDA, there's no reference samples. When you were learning PSDA, you could have an example of a silt loam that was determined in the lab. You knew exactly the sand, silt, clay content, and you could do that. But for the visual estimation, there aren't known samples, so it's kind of a more subjective procedure. The fiber content, the definition for fiber content from taxonomy, it's the percent volume by rubbing, and it is defined as after rubbing, and it's used as a criteria for soil taxonomy. And Mike referred to this also is rubbed fiber. For one thing, it's not really clear, like some other things in taxonomy, what is the rationale for using rubbed versus non-rubbed, and then again, the procedure for rubbing, how hard do you rub, how long do you rub, is not well. So again, that kind of adds to the subjectivity. Okay, so fiber is defined as from 0.15 millimeter, that's what's retained on a 100 mesh sieve, to 20 millimeters. And the classes are defined in fractions. So even though, you know, in the previous slide it said to report as a percentage, in taxonomy the classes are percent. So the fibric is greater than or equal to 3/4 fiber, sapric less than 1/6, and then the humic is more or less what's in between. There was a paper in Soil Survey Horizons, and it's quite old, but the authors brought out this note that from soil taxonomy, and this is in the old version, the green version, page 66, where it states, fractions are used rather than percentage to avoid implying a higher degree of accuracy than is warranted. So, you know, they realized when they set this up that it was not a really high, it's some subjectivity involved. So, and then also in the same paper, they concluded, or they expressed the opinion that using decimal percentages rather than fractions leads to overestimating the sapric and fibric. Those are the end categories, and underestimating the humic. So again, the fiber content has good points, but it also has some drawbacks. Okay, the Von Post method. Okay, so how is the Von Post applicable? Okay, first of all, it is really not a direct substitution for fiber content. It's not a fiber content method. You don't end up with an estimate of percentage fibers. But it does estimate the degree of composition on a 1 to 10 scale. So, and from a practical standpoint, the Von Post number can be used in the same applications that fiber would be. And then the fact that Von Post is on a 1 to 10 scale means that it can be scaled and mathematically used in estimations, formulas, models, similarly to a percentage. It's not a percentage, but it does lend itself to being scaled. Okay, so now what the Von Post, as Mike mentioned, has been around for almost 100 years. And there have been some examples of quantitative applications of this, like what can we estimate, or what is it good for, even from a quantitative standpoint, not just a qualitative. So let's look at some of the applications. Okay, this reference is also the book that Mike mentioned. It's a very good publication on organic soils by the Forest Service, and it was done at their experiment station in Minnesota. So they looked at relationship between bulk density and Von Post value. And this demonstrates, these were actually samples from Finland, but they demonstrate the relationship. And there's actually a pretty good relationship. And they also broke it down based on vegetation type. So, you know, it's obviously they're, even with the same Von Post method, within that H category, the different types of vegetation are going to have different characteristics. So when they did that, they got a good relationship between bulk density and von Post. They also added that if you even add in some additional factors, for instance, like ash content, you can even in a lot of cases get a better model, a better response. Another study in Northern Ontario comparing bulk density to von Post scale, they got a good linear relationship there. This was in a similar geographic region, so one would assume that it's probably similar vegetation. And then note also that I think this scale here, the y-axis probably should have a decimal point there, otherwise you get some really high bulk densities. But another illustration of the relationship between the von Post and bulk density. Another thing that's related, or has been shown to relate, is hydraulic conductivity von Post. This is a publication in Finland, Finnish organic soil materials, and again they show a relationship probably not as strong as it was as we saw there in the data for the bulk density, but again by breaking it down into vegetation types, there is a relationship. This also, as you'll note, is not a linear relationship, but it is there is definitely a relationship there. The people who did this also noted that some other factors that are going to affect this besides the pure von Post H value are things like the vegetation type, the size of the fragments, and an important one was the orientation of the fragments or the fibers. Are they horizontal, vertical? Are they mixed? That type of thing has quite so if that kind of thing can be characterized, then that probably would improve this prediction of KSAT. Okay. The same Forest Service publication had some data where they didn't actually do cause and effect models, but they did collect data and come up with ranges of H values for other characteristics. Now, lateral effects is something that probably some people, some of you folks have done, looking at the effects of drainage on nearby wetlands. So, as far as figuring the offset for not affecting those wetlands. And those use these input factors like KSAT, drainable porosity. So those are some other things that are related. This is not actually, again, a predictive model, but they show that there is a strong relationship between some of these things like drainable porosity and KSAT, and that go into, and these are used in something like the Van Schifgard equation that's used to calculate these lateral effects. So quite a few of the hydraulic properties are very closely related to von Post. Again, some of that same data, here they actually express the KSAT in days. They're the same numbers, but it's in centimeters per day. So you can see the whole range from the high fiber content to the high degree of composition. There's a tremendous range. As we said, it's not a linear range, but it's that would be over 1,000-fold difference in those von Post classes of hydraulic conductivity. Okay, so now how accurate are these methods? How precise are these methods? And Mike alluded to this also, that there was a study done, and this is the one by Malterer, published in the Soil Science Society Journal, comparing these different methods that Mike referred to of degree of decomposition or fiber content. And again, this is a mixture here. Some of these are actually fiber content. The USDA fiber volume methods are the ones currently used by the KSSL lab that uses the syringe to estimate to measure the fiber volume, and then also the modified is the version that we now use that also uses a mixer treatment to separate or allow the separate material to be removed. So those are the methods currently used, or the modified by the KSSL. The ASTM method is a more or less a wet sieving method. The material is washed through a wet sieve, or in some cases rubbed through the 100 mesh sieve and then dried and weighed. So it's a fairly simple method. The downside, or why it's really not that applicable, is a weight method. So you end up with weights rather than volume. And our fiber, our classification is based on volume. Then we have these Soviet centrifugation methods, which are essentially a sieve in a centrifuge tube, and the sample is put on that sieve and then it's centrifuged. So the centrifugation forces the material through there, and then what's left you can figure is a volume percentage that doesn't or does go through that mesh. And of course, then we have so that's a fiber method. USDA, the pyrophosphate color method, is not really a fiber method. It's more of a degree of decomposition method. And then of course the von Post method. So in this study, comparison of methods, they used 10 master samples, you might say, of selected to be in the center of each von Post class as much as possible. Then they did repetitions. Apologize for these slipping here, but I think you can tell. We're using these different methods to look at the variability, the precision. When you do repeated measurements, how precise is it? How predictable are these methods? And the results that came out, the Soviet centrifuge method and the von Post were the most precise, the lowest coefficients of variability, and then going on up the scale, the pyrophosphate, the least precise. So their conclusion that was the von Post method and the standard and the way they worded it are not excelled in their ability to give precise measurements. So they didn't say, it's just another way of saying that they were the best. And they also make the comment that the centrifugation method takes an hour, half hour to perform in the lab, and there's really not that much of a significant advantage over the 3-minute von Post test. And I'll add on to that this centrifugation method is it's not well documented. The procedure and the equipment for it is not readily available. So it's not a really highly used seed. So some other of the von Post, I think we've talked about it. It's a good method to add to our kind of arsenal of things to characterize organic soils. But we probably should stop there. The characterization of these is still under development, so some of the things we might look at might be parallel to some of the mineral soil things like the description of the plant type. That's an important thing. I like the plant species. Is it moss? Is it forest? Is it sedge? Those types of things. Then descriptions of the fiber. The fiber can go from 0.15 to 20 millimeters. That's a big range. So, if we can do a better job of describing those, diameter, length, thickness, orientation is an important thing. Are the fibers laying horizontal, vertical, or different? So those are some of the things maybe we can work on a system for describing these and add to that. Also, capturing these additional measurements like KSAT and bulk density would be useful in kind of correlating these and developing models for the future. I've got a couple of bonus slides here I'll show pretty quickly of this Russian centrifuge method. I won't go into the details, but just to give you the idea. The sample's dispersed in a liquid and then centrifuged, so that gives you your starting volume of sample. Then it goes through the centrifuge tube with the sieve in the bottom. After centrifugation, part of the fibers remain on that screen, and then part of them go through, so that actually lets you measure the volume of that goes through the screen versus the on top of it. The problem, as we mentioned, is there's not a really good, the original version is in Russian, and there's not a lot of detailed descriptions out there, and there are some points of this that are really kind of not clear. So it's kind of one that still needs some development. So that's just a little quick view of that. So anyway, that's the end of my part. Thanks for your attention, and I'll be glad to, if we don't answer questions today, feel free to email or contact. I'll be glad to talk to you. Thanks. I'll turn it back to Sean.
All right, thanks, Steve. And I just want to bring people's attention to the Von Post training video that's on YouTube. That video supports the National Coastal Blue Carbon Assessment Project, with a nationwide effort to inventory blue carbon soil stocks in coastal ecosystems. And this Von Post scale can be used as a supplemental organic soil horizon description that could be used throughout that project. And as you've heard, the scale also supports soil survey modeling to predict bulk density, hydraulic conductivity, and more. So this and other videos are available on our National Soil Survey Center YouTube channel. And all you have to do is go to YouTube and put in Von Post, and this video will come up. I guarantee it's the only one out there. So it's a very unique thing, and we got 1,100 plus views on that in the 6 months it's been out there. So with that, I just got a picture of Steve here working in the field, and I'll encourage people to put their questions in the Q&A, and we'll take care of those as they come in. And I'll invite the presenters to share their webcams for this summary session. We answer questions. So I'm sharing my picture there. And Matt and Mike and Steve, if you're able to, go ahead and share your camera as well. We do have one question that's come in from DP. When using the Von Post method in soils with no pore water, should the soil scientist wet the sample to be saturated condition? We often see a drop in water table during the summer in the upper part of our histosols. So Mike, do you want to address that one?
Yeah, Sean, I can. I'm in Duluth, Minnesota. We have precipitation exceeds evapotranspiration, so I've never seen that situation. I don't know the answer to it. We could research it and get back to DP on that.
Okay, and then Rob had a comment that excellent job. Thanks for the shout out on the National Coastal Blue Carbon Assessment Project. Matt has a question. How does it perform on mucky mineral surface layers?
That one to me again, Sean?
Sure.
I've never really tried it on mucky mineral surfaces. I've just gone with the standard mineral texturing methods. I don't think it would work at all on mucky minerals because it's a low organic matter content.
Well, and he put in for clarification with high organics.
Yeah, I would agree that it's probably not it's only applicable to organic soil material.
Right, that's really what it was meant for.
Last call for questions. I will note that when we started on this project, that was very interesting. This is one of those what's old is new methods, because the von Post scale is almost 100 years old. So it's been around, and now it's back in favor or rediscovered.
I think it's been used in Scandinavia and Europe quite a bit. We're just now discovering it.
All right, Rob has a comment to mention the Army Corps supplements. So in the handout section, there's the von Post table I've loaded as a handout, as well as the Army Corps regional supplement. And maybe I'll have one of the other presenters talk about those two things. And then we also have some web links to the National Soil Survey Center YouTube channel and a direct link to this video itself. Probably Steve might be the best one to talk about the Corps regional supplement.
Yeah, the core supplements have a table, or at least the Northeast, I think, that correlates the von Post categories to the textural or the organic classes. So I think that's a good thing, and I think maybe the NRCS sometime will come up with a formal correlation for those between the von Post and the Humic separate classes.
All right, the Waverly office has a question. How do we populate the von Post result in a PET-on description? Mike, do you want to talk about how you do that?
Yeah, certainly. There is no good place that I could find in NASA's PET-on to populate von Post. I buried it into the PET-on notes somewhere, and that was the best I could do. I did mention this to our regional office, and they are aware of that, and I suggested that a place be made in NASA's PET-on for that data element. We'll see if they can get that done.
And I can tell you that is on the list to add. It'll be part of the work that there's contractors that get tasked with making these data model changes for us, and there's this and many others that are on the list to be incorporated, so they're available when you do a PET-on description in NASA's, and that can be captured there. So the next release will come out and have that.
That's excellent to hear. And the other thing, I would make sure that when you run a report to get a PET-on description, you run a report that will generate the notes portions as well.
All right, any other questions? Well, seeing none, I want to thank Matt and Steve and Mike for your time and effort to make this presentation, and thanks to all the participants for joining in. We hope you found this information beneficial. And as I mentioned earlier, a recording of this webinar will be available on our center's YouTube channel within a couple days, so feel free to let your colleagues know about this training opportunity. If you like these kinds of webinars, I would invite you to fill out this poll. What webinar topic would you like to hear about? I've done this in the past and got some great ideas I'm following up on. Also, I've got listed the next webinar coming up. It's kind of a specialty one to help with the Coronavirus Financial Assistance Program, the basics of how to do wetland compliance. So that'll be one. I got the link. It'll be the same room link for that webinar. So with that, this concludes our webinar presentation.